Our next speaker will be Dr. Michael Shermer. Dr. Shermer is a publisher of Skeptic magazine and editor of Skeptic.com, a monthly columnist for Scientific American and an adjunct professor at Claremont Graduate University and Chapman University. His latest book is Believing the Brain, From Ghosts and Gods to Politics and Conspiracies, how we construct beliefs and reinforce them as truths. He also wrote Why Darwin Matters, Evolution and a Case Against Intelligent Design, and is the author of The Science of Good and Evil and Why People Believe Weird Things. Dr. Shermer received his BA in psychology from Pepperdine University, MA in experimental psychology from California State University, Fullerton, and his PhD in history of science from Claremont University. He's appeared on such shows as The Colbert Report, 2020, Dateline, Charlie Rose, and Larry King Live, but proudly never Jerry Springer.
Anyway, so I'm glad to be here. I'm from Southern California, so your 7 degrees this morning was quite a shock. But at least I made it. I understand last year's speaker flew all the way from England to Calgary and turned around and went home and did it by Skype because he was too cold. So at least I braved that. So I just thought I'd tell you a little bit about what I do for a living and then talk about how the mind works and how to think critically about claims. People make all sorts of claims, most of which are not true about all kinds of things. How do we know what's true about anything? And then specifically I'll address some food myths, diet myths, things like that related to your industry. So this is our magazine. It's called Skeptic Magazine. It's the quarterly publication of the Skeptic Society, which I started in 1992. We're available in every bookstore in North America, including in Canada. And each issue has a particular theme to it. For example, on the top left one there, we did one on the future of intelligence. Are people getting smarter or dumber? Well, I'm from Southern California, so I have an opinion about this myself. But it turns out actually that people are getting smarter. IQ scores are going up about 3 points every 10 years for the past century. And this was discovered by a guy named James Flynn, a psychologist, so it's called the Flynn effect. And he discovered this by studying the IQ test companies who had to renorm the tests about every decade because by definition, the average IQ is supposed to be 100, and it kept going up and up and up. So they had to make the test harder and harder to renorm it so that it would adjust for that. In other words, generationally speaking, kids are getting smarter. So it really is okay if they do all that texting and video games and all that stuff. It turns out that most of that stuff is pretty good for the brain in terms of abstract reasoning. We did one on the bottom left there on artificial intelligence. When will computers achieve human-level intelligence? This is one of the great debates, and we concluded that we're 5 years away and always will be. Turns out it's a really hard problem to solve. And we're not even close to that yet. We did one on Scientology and cults. You know, what is a cult anyway? How do you define that? How do you know if somebody is joining a cult or not? We did one on Ponzi schemes. That's the eponymous Charles Ponzi, but of course we did this after Bernie Madoff scammed so many people. And it was clear during that story that the people he scammed were not unintelligent, uneducated, ignorant people. These were, in fact, well-educated, very successful people who got conned. So the problem isn't that people believe weird things because they're uneducated or they're not smart. That's not the problem at all. It has something to do with how our minds work, which I'll be talking about today. Climate change. Are you a global warming skeptic, or are you skeptical of the global warming skeptics? And that alone tells us something, that skepticism is not a position you just stake out ahead of time no matter what. It depends on the claims and the evidence for the claim. And you have to take them one at a time. It's okay to believe all sorts of things as long as the evidence is good. So we've addressed a lot of the questions. There isn't one question on that one, by the way. There's at least 5 questions. Is the Earth getting warmer? If it is, what's the cause? Natural or artificial, or both? 3, how much warmer is it going to get? That depends. Are you talking about in 10 years, 50 years, 500 years? And then what will the consequences be? Well, we don't know. Depends on what the time horizon is that you're talking about and how much warmer it's going to get. And then finally, what should we do about it? So those are at least 5 different questions. So you can't just stake out a claim and say, I'm just skeptical. Well, of what? So that's the kind of way we address these sorts of things. We did one on 9/11 conspiracy theories. Was 9/11 a conspiracy? Well, it was. By definition, 19 members of Al Qaeda plotting to fly planes into buildings ahead of time without telling us. That's a conspiracy. But as we've discovered, there's a lot of so-called 9/11 truthers who think that the United States federal government orchestrated 9/11. Anyway, we lined up all their claims and addressed them one by one. But you know how we know that the federal government didn't orchestrate 9/11? Because it worked. That works whichever administration is in place, left or right, unfortunately. So you can join the Skeptic Society, subscribe to Skeptic Magazine at skeptic.com. This is our latest issue, comes out this week on diet myths, so it's appropriate that my trip here coincided with that. We just happened to do that. And when you join, you get to meet the skeptical dog. He's very skeptical. So what are we doing when we're talking about skepticism in science? Well, we're just looking for natural explanations for natural phenomena, and always asking what's the more likely explanation. So here's a crop circle. What's more likely, that aliens traversed the vast distances of interstellar space and landed in Farmer Bob's field in Pucker Brush, Kansas, and made a crop circle that says skeptic.com? Or that somebody with Photoshop just made a fake slide for me? Well, we have no evidence of aliens landing anywhere. We have lots of evidence that crop circles are faked by people with boards and ropes. And we have lots of evidence of how easy it is to fake photographs with Photoshop. So that's our more likely one. Another way to say that is before we say something is out of this world, let's first make sure that it's not in this world. And again, we could ask the what's more likely question, that aliens traversed the vast distances of interstellar space and landed in Sacramento, California to help the governor, my governor for 8 years, or that the World Weekly News just makes stuff up. Well, again, we have no evidence of aliens landing anywhere, but we have lots of evidence of tabloid newspapers and magazines just making stuff up. Just lying, just faking photographs happens all the time. Another way to say that is reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away. There really is a reality. We really can know something about it, and science is our best tool for that. Another way to say it is that the facts do not cease to exist because they are ignored. We have to pay attention to facts. Facts are the key to science. As Daniel Patrick Moynihan said, everyone is entitled to his own opinion, but not his own facts. One of our little popular sayings is by Carl Sagan, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Now, I understand that people in your industry make all sorts of extraordinary claims about their products. The first thing you should do is ask, where's your evidence? And not just anecdotes that somebody plops up on a web page. That's not evidence. And the more extraordinary the claim, the more extraordinary the evidence would be. And if somebody has no evidence, you can follow what I call Hitchens' dictum after my late friend Christopher Hitchens. What can be asserted without evidence can also be dismissed without evidence. You don't have to answer every claim. If somebody has a claim and no evidence, you can just dismiss it. In other words, we actually can know something in science, and one of the best essays about this was by Isaac Asimov, the great science fiction writer, called The Relativity of Wrong. When people thought the Earth was flat, they were wrong. When people thought the Earth was spherical, they were wrong. As you know, the Earth is an oblate spheroid, fatter on the equator than on the poles. But if you think that thinking the Earth is spherical is just as wrong as thinking the Earth is flat, then your view is wronger than both of them put together. I like that. There are degrees of wrongness, and some are worse than others. As Richard Dawkins said, when two opposite points of view are expressed with equal intensity, the truth does not necessarily lie halfway in between them. It is possible for one side to be simply wrong. So as a fun example of the self-correcting nature of science, that is, we're always kind of trying to change our explanations based on new evidence that's always coming in. So all conclusions are provisional. There are no capital T truths in science. This is my friend Simon Singh, who's a physicist and cosmologist and science writer in England, who's always looking for new ways to explain how science works and what we know about science for popular audiences. And so he did a very fun essay in The Guardian on a very popular song a few years ago by the top pop singer Katie Millau. This song was called 9 Million Bicycles. It's a love song. It's about how much she loves her partner, and and tries to find different ways to express it. There's 9 million bicycles in Beijing. That's a fact. It's a thing we can't deny, like the fact that I'll love you till I die. We're 12 billion light years from the edge. That's a guess. No one can ever say it's true, but I know that I'll always be with you. And here's that portion.
We are 12 billion light years from the edge. That's a guess. No one can ever say it's true, but I know that I will always be with you.
So Simon wrote this essay in The Guardian called Katie Malau's Bad Science. Now he did this tongue-in-cheek. He likes her music. But basically said, back to those passages, we're 12 million light years from the edge. Okay, 12 billion light years from the edge. Okay, it's not 12 billion. We actually have it down to about 13.7 billion light years, plus or minus, depending on the error margins based on the estimates made, which are not perfect. And different telescopes and different astronomical teams come up with slightly different estimates, so there's a range there, the error bars. And there's no edge to the universe. The universe is just expanding into nothing. It's creating its own spaces, expanding, so there's no edge. And it's not a guess. Astronomers have been working day and especially night trying to figure out, the structure of the universe and how old it is. And so although it's true, no one can say it's true, we have some pretty good estimates based on the best available information. Well, much to his surprise, he heard from Katie Malau, who said, I'm so embarrassed I got the astronomy wrong, because I was in the astronomy club in high school, and so they met at a radio station and they recut it.
We are
So here's the original.
12 billion light years from the edge. That's a guess. No one can ever say it's true, but I know that I will always be with you.
And here's the new version.
We are 30.
Sorry.
We are 30.7 billion light years from the edge of the observable universe. That's a good estimate with well-defined error bars, and with the available information, I predict that I will always be with you.
So even love can be improved. So let's return to that question, are aliens coming to Earth, are UFOs their spacecraft? Well, what's more likely, that spacecraft, these UFOs represent spacecraft from other worlds or anomalies in this world? Well, here's a UFO taken from my house in Pasadena, California. Here it is again, sort of up in the upper top screen there. You can see downtown Los Angeles in the backdrop there. Here it is diving over downtown LA. Here it is with its rocket engines going off. Now, if that looks like a hubcap, a Buick hubcap, that's because that's what that was. We were filming a show for National Geographic on how to fake your own UFO photographs. Turns out it's not so hard. One way to do it is you can just dangle a little plastic model with the mountains in the backdrop. That's my backyard there. That's my daughter taking pictures. I'm holding up a pane of glass there, and to which I've attached with double-sided tape 3 coins. And so you just focus on infinity with your 35 millimeter camera and shoot through the glass, and it looks like UFOs hovering over Los Angeles. Why they always fly in triangles, we don't really know. But the triangle effect seems to work. 2 quarters and a dime, or a quarter and 2 dimes seems to work nicely. So UFOs, well, what do they mean? It's just unidentified flying object. Unidentified doesn't mean extraterrestrial. Unidentified just means I don't know what it was. And that's all you have to say. You don't have to build a whole theory about aliens and so on. I don't know doesn't mean your pet theory is right. It just means it's unknown and nothing more. So what do we have to do with those kinds of anecdotes, those stories, those anomalies, weird things that people experience? You don't have to do anything with them. Just enjoy them and then try to figure out what the cause was. If you can't, that's okay. We don't have to construct a whole new worldview outside of science just because we can't explain 100% of things. Nevertheless, people want to believe, as in the iconic poster from X-Files, which was the basis of my book, The Believing Brain, in which I talk about the brain as a belief engine. That is, we are pattern-seeking primates connecting the dots. A appears to be connected to B, and that's called association learning, or just learning. It's just connecting one thing to another. You're all familiar with, of course, Pavlov's famous dogs, where you ring the bell and you give him some food, and he salivates. You ring the bell, you give him some food, and he salivates. You ring the bell, and he salivates. He's just associated the bell with the food, And now the bell becomes the conditioned stimulus. He's learned that. Or Skinner's rats in the box that learn to press the bars to get a food reward. They just associate the one act with the other act, and pretty soon it becomes learning. So there's nothing particularly weird about that. To show you how long ago it was that I was doing that kind of research. That computer was the computer we used to run those experiments when I was in a lab doing these kinds of experiments. That calculator there on the bottom right, that was a Texas Instrument programmable calculator. That was cutting edge in the 70s. And now you kids I see here, some of you students, you won't recognize those yellow things, but those are called pencils, and we used to use those, along with that white stuff called paper. And this is one of my pigeons, and it turns out if you randomly reinforce him when he's moving around in the cage, whatever he was doing just before he got rewarded, he repeats that behavior. So maybe he's in there and he's hungry because you haven't fed him a while, and he's doing this, and he bumps the side wall with his wing, and the little hopper comes up on that box and he gets fed. So he thinks, whatever a bird is doing, well, I'll just do that again. So he repeats the behavior, and every once in a while, if he gets rewarded, he just keeps repeating it. So you don't have to reinforce him every time. He just has to be reinforced every once in a while. In fact, the program of reinforcement to keep him doing the weird thing is exactly the same program you'll find on those machines that are out there in this casino. They're programmed just to pay off just enough to keep you sitting there long enough, but not so much that the house doesn't win. So I don't know if you've been doing gambling here this week, but I'll give you a tip. They're going to win if you sit there long enough. That's why they're here. So I call this process patternicity, the tendency to find meaningful patterns in both meaningful and meaningless noise. That is, the pigeon thinks there was a pattern, that A was connected to B, even though it wasn't. It was completely random. So how do you know which is which? Well, when we do this, we make two primary thinking errors. A type 1 error is a false positive. That is, believing a pattern is real when it isn't, finding a non-existent pattern. Or a type 2 or false negative is not believing a pattern is real when it is. That is, not recognizing a real pattern. So here's our thought experiment. Imagine you're an animal on the plains of Africa with all those dangerous predators running around, and you hear a rustle in the grass. Is it a dangerous predator, or is it just the wind? Well, if you believe that the rustle in the grass is a dangerous predator, and it turns out it's just the wind, that's a low-cost error to make. No harm. You just scurry off. And you see, we've all seen the animals on the fur, fin, and feather shows that are very super hypersensitive to noises, especially prey animals. But that doesn't cost them anything. On the other hand, if you believe that the rustle in the grass is just the wind, and it turns out it's a dangerous predator, you're lunch. You've just been given a Darwin Award for taking yourself out of the gene pool early before reproducing. So this is the formula I've designed for this, in which patternicities occur whenever the cost of making a type 1 error is less than the cost of making a type 2 error. Now, why can't you just sit there in the grass and collect more data until you know for sure whether it's a predator or just the wind? And the answer is that too will make you lunch, because predators don't wait around for prey animals to collect data. That's why they are stealthy. That's why they stalk their prey. That's why they are camouflaged and so on. So I call this the pattern detection problem. Assessing the difference between type 1 and type 2 errors is highly problematic, especially in split-second life and death situations. So the default position is just assume all patterns are real. Every twig snapping, every rustle in the grass, it's probably real. It's probably a predator just in case. So in other words, assume that all rustles in the grass are dangerous predators and not the wind. In other words, the way our beliefs work is whatever we hear or see, we just automatically tend to believe it. I'll believe it just in case it's true. Now, a lot of the times it's a relatively harmless thing. You read your astrology column, or you enjoy tarot cards or palm reading, whatever. That's not a big deal. It's not going to take you out of the gene pool. And so those kinds of superstitions persist because our brains are wired to just believe whatever we encounter. So I'll show you some fun examples now of things that look like patterns that you'll recognize but aren't real patterns. They're accidental patterns. They're random patterns. What does that look like? This is the audience participation portion of the day. Yeah, it looks like a horse, right? How about here? Horse or a dog, maybe. I presume you'll recognize this. Yep, there's the cow. And now, by the way, in Southern California, most people don't get this. That tells you something. Until I put the red line around it, which is, in psychology, we call this priming, cognitive priming. I'm priming your brain. I'm telling you this is what you're supposed to see. And then when I go back to it, it pops out even more. Now the reason for that is because I've created a model memory in your brain of what you're supposed to see, and then you'll see it. So this process of priming is quite striking. Here's one you probably will recognize because it's fairly famous, but do you see the Dalmatian dog? There he is. Now he probably pops out a little bit more after the priming. How about here? Saturn. How about here? That's good because there's nothing there. But if you think you see something, this could be it could be an indication of brain damage. No, I'm just kidding. So in other words, priming is that we form our beliefs first. We have a model, a memory, something. And then we filter what comes in from the world through those models that are already there, that tell us what we're supposed to see, what we're supposed to believe. This is how magicians operate. They tell you, I'm going to saw the woman in half now. And that's what you think you see, even though you know he's not really doing that. So it's a priming effect. Beliefs determine perceptions and so on. I'm going to give you one of my favorite examples of this that has both visual and auditory priming. I'm going to play for you a portion of a song forward with the words which you'll recognize right away. And then I'm going to play that same portion backwards. Supposedly, people believe that hidden in rock songs are deep satanic messages that are supposed to operate subliminally on your brain and corrupt the youth. This is a big thing in the 70s and 80s. And then I'll play it for you. You won't hear much of anything, but maybe one or two words. Then I'll play it for you backwards again with the actual words on the screen, the prime, and you'll hear every word. Okay, here it is forward. Now, frankly, I'm not sure what it means forward. But when I was in high school, this was deeply meaningful. You ever do that? You go back and listen to old rock songs you loved back in the day. You go, "What? That is the dumbest song. I can't believe I like that song." I was watching an old Dick Cavett show on YouTube the other night, and he had John Lennon on. He was asking him, "What did it mean, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds? Was that LSD?" He goes, "No, it was my kids drawing from school." Oh. Usually they don't mean anything. All right, here it is backwards now. No words on the screen. You're just listening for the hidden, secret, satanic words in there. What'd you get? Satan, yeah. Yeah, what? Oh, Satan. Yeah. 666, anybody get that? All right, here it is again, this time with the words on the screen. You'll hear every word of this hidden secret message. You don't want to go anywhere near that tool shed. It's a very, very dangerous place. Satan is hidden there. So this is just sort of a fun example of a much more serious thing that actually does happen in our brains. That is when we are told this is what you're supposed to hear or see, politically, whatever, ideologically, whatever beliefs we hold, by books, by teachers, by commentators on TV or whatever, then you tend to hear what it is they're pointing out. Even if it's just a conceptual idea, that's how it works. And that's why we have to be very careful about that, because it's easy to fall into, well, yeah, Rush Limbaugh was saying just the other day, or whoever, and then you just start filtering that in through those models. So it's easy to be taken down a path which maybe you don't want to go, or maybe you do. There's other things we're programmed to see automatically, like faces. And it turns out that in our brains we have neural networks designed to see faces readily everywhere. Of course, you all recognize the President of the United States, but if you scan it for just a minute, left and right, you'll see one of them looks a little odd. Which one looks a little off? One on the left looks a little weird, yeah, so I'll rotate it. Now it's on the right. So here these perceptual psychologists have simply reversed the mouth and eyes, which is harder to see when it's upside down, because when it's upside down, there's a neural network in your temporal lobes just here above your ears that just see faces. Just all you need is like 2 dots for the eyes and a slash for the mouth, and it'll fire. We know this from brain scans. You can see it becoming active when you show any kind of face. Then when you see the right side up, you start scanning the details, the eyes, the mouth, the nose and ears and so forth, and you see that there's something wrong. This was originally discovered by perceptual psychologist Peter Thompson at York University with Margaret Thatcher, who he reversed in a little more scary way. But those neural networks are located right there where that arrow is, which is right about here, just above and behind your ears. We have them on each side. And those are the areas that perceive faces and also facial details. And we know that's what it does, A, because we've now scanned brains while people look at faces inside a brain scanner, but also from brain damage, tumors, strokes, brain damage from falls and impacts that affect that area. People can become face blind. They don't recognize other people. They simply cannot see a face of somebody they know. Sometimes they don't even recognize themselves in a mirror. Any of Oliver Sacks' books will tell you that the brain is a very complex organ in which a lot of things can go wrong. So once you start seeing faces, you see them everywhere. Here's the famous face on Mars. And the UFO people got very excited about this. The Martians are sending us a signal by carving this giant face on a mountaintop. So they did a letter writing campaign to NASA, who then sent a spacecraft there for other reasons, not to appease the UFO people. But while they're there, they were taking photographs of every square foot of Mars. There's now a Google map for Mars. You can look this up. And here it is. It's just an eroded mountain. But if you squint, you can kind of see the face pop back out a little bit, because by squinting, you've reduced the granularity of the data from fine grain to coarse grain, and then your facial recognition software kicks in and you see faces. But faces are all over the place. Here's the happy face on Mars. This is one of my favorites here. This is not far from here, I think. This is the famous Indian Head Valley. It's actually a valley, even though it looks like a mountain range popping out, but it's not far from here. And it's pretty big, so you can go to those Google coordinates and see it. And here's faces just on everyday objects that I've been collecting. The mean broom. Again, sometimes it just takes 2 dots and some kind of a mouth. Oh no! I like this one. These shadows on a garage door can you see the face, the sort of profile? Here's the alien head. Here's the Edvard Munch's The Scream. Here's the nun bun. This is one of my favorites. This is from a Tennessee baker who discovered that Mother Teresa's likeness appeared in one of his buns. So he had it laminated and put on the shelf, and people came to see it. He even had T-shirts made. He saw I use this example in my TED Talk, so he sent me one of the T-shirts. I actually have the nun bun on a T-shirt, which is kind of funny. Here's Our Lady of the Chicago Underpass. Again, these are all examples of things we recognize, even though they're not real. This is just a water stain in an underpass that people came to pay tribute to. Some people saw on this bonfire the Pope. One of my favorites is the Virgin Mary who appeared on a grilled cheese sandwich, which sold on eBay for $28,500 to a Las Vegas casino. Only in America can you sell a grilled cheese sandwich for that kind of money. Here it is up close. It's really quite striking. You can see somebody took a bite out of it on the bottom left there. Well, I don't know what the Virgin Mary and Middle Age iconography is supposed to look like, but I mean, to me, it's a little bit more like Madonna on toast, or perhaps someone like Jane Russell. Or actually, when I first saw it, because I get to hold it, I thought, this looks like this woman, and that's my mom. When she was 17 years old back in the day. How about that, huh? In case you're wondering what atheists see, by the way, nothing. It's the official atheist toast. There's the Virgin Mary on a side of a bank building in Clearwater, Florida, that a couple of my friends and I went to visit. Candles were there, people were there with their wheelchairs and crutches to be healed. It was, kind of a sacred icon. But it turns out if you walk around the building, Clearwater, Florida isn't. The water isn't very clear. It's very mineralized. Wherever there's sprinklers, the windows were all stained, especially if there was a palm tree. There was kind of this kind of shape that often appeared there. There was one on the back that they started to wipe off because I guess you can only have one miracle per building. But you can see where the sprinkler was there and the palm trees and so forth. Again, we can ask the what's more likely question. Is it really a miracle of Mary, or is it a miracle of Marge? Well, I'm not Catholic, but I am a Simpsons fan, so I thought, it looks like Marge Simpson. So the other thing that's going on here is a confirmation bias, in which we seek and find confirming evidence for what we already believe and ignore the disconfirming evidence. You remember the hits, you forget the misses. You notice things that support what you want to believe. You ignore the things that don't support what you want to believe. All of us do it in all areas of our life, from the sort of silly, fun things like doing tarot card readings. I've done a number for TV shows just to demonstrate different principles, psychic readings, tarot card readings, palm readings, and so on. It's pretty simple to do. You do a cold reading technique. You just throw out a lot of different statements. You ask a lot of questions. People will remember the handful of hits you get. They'll forget the 2 dozen, 3 dozen, 200 things you said that have no connection to them whatsoever. And after the reading, they'll go, that's amazing. He got this and this and this and this. Yeah, and he missed all these other things. But you don't even remember these. I don't even remember when I've gone for many readings just for fun. I record them and I count the number of hits and misses. You don't need many, like the pigeon or the rat pressing the bar or us pulling the slot machines. You only need the reinforcement every once in a while, and you'll remember that. Confirmation bias is very powerful, like in terms of like political claims that people make. If you give a self-reported a Democrat a copy of a health care reform bill and you tell them it was drafted by Democrats, they will rate it very highly. They'll find very few errors in it. They'll like it. If you tell them it was written by a Republican or a conservative, they'll rip it to shreds, find all kinds of errors. They won't like it. And the reverse is true. If somebody's self-reported conservative or Republican, you tell them it was a Democratic paper, that they'll find errors in it and so on. We all do this, not just in the silly stuff, but in the serious stuff as well. We all find confirming evidence for what we already want to believe, which is why you got to force yourself to read other newspapers that you don't normally read. Like I read the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, add them up and divide by 2 to find the truth. Because I get my liberal fix, then I get my conservative fix, and it's like, okay, somewhere in there I can figure out for myself what's going on, because I know that these biases exist. So I want to look at some of these food and diet myths on GMOs, gluten-free, the paleo diet, and all these things. But I want to back up for a minute and comment on why I think what you're doing is one of the most important things that's ever been done in the history of civilization. That is farming, not just farming, but smart farming. And it's been getting smarter over the millennia. So if we look at the big picture, let's just sort of pull back for a minute and do a quick history lesson here. Time before present. So from however you want to start when our species began, probably the earliest we could say would be about 100,000 years ago. The last group that migrated out of Africa into Europe and the Levant was about 100 to 120,000 years ago. Anyway, all the way up to about 10,000 years ago, everybody on Earth lived in tiny bands of hunter-gatherers, a couple of dozen to a couple hundred individuals max. That's all a hunting, gathering, fishing lifestyle can support. You can't support much more than these small bands. Sometime between 10 and around 5,000 years ago, these bands began to get a little bit larger into tribes. And then 5,000 to 3,000 years ago, tribes began to coalesce into chiefdoms, and then chiefdoms into states, state building 3,000, 1,000 years ago. And then to the present of empires of hundreds of thousands, millions, and even one with over 1 billion. So how did this happen? It happened because of agriculture, which spontaneously erupted roughly about the same time, about 10,000 years ago, in 7 different places around the world marked there. Why did it happen? Nobody sat down and said, Og, or whatever your name would be if you lived 10,000 years ago, you know what, we're running out of food, let's invent something, we'll call it farming. That's not how archaeologists think it happened. Just as populations expanded just a little bit and the ecosystem was unable to support it through hunting, gathering, and fishing, by accident, by trial and error, people figured out that there are ways to produce food and have a little bit of a surplus, and the populations begin to grow. And then and farming can support thousands to hundreds of thousands to millions and even billions of people. I just read the UN report yesterday that projections for 2100 originally we were going to max out at about 11 billion in 2050 and go back down to about 7 or 8, 9 billion by 2100. Now it looks like, because of Africa, that's not going to happen. It's probably going to be more like 12 to 14 billion in 2100. So you got your work cut out for us. We need more food and higher quality food. But what Africa needs really is education and so forth to help get out of, and non-poverty to get those population numbers down. But anyway, the point is that farming is good for large populations, but is it good for health? Originally, probably not. Compared to what is the question we have to ask. After farming, that is roughly from about 8,000 BC to about a century ago, people were shorter than hunter-gatherers. We know we have skeletons of hunter-gatherers. They were taller than everybody until about a century ago. They had fewer cavities. They had fewer bone diseases. They lived longer than people who lived in farming communities. We know this from the skeletons. So there are deficits to farming because it's a less varied diet. This is not smart. This is non-smart farming. This is trial and error. We're just beginning farming. And larger populations also lead to more infectious diseases. But the benefits are you have a reliable food source rather than spending all day trying to figure out if you're going to eat or not. With hunting and gathering, and you can support larger populations. So it began with 8 different founder crops: emmer wheat, einkorn wheat, barley, lentils, peas, chickpea, bitter fitch, and flax. And 5 founder animals: sheep, goats, cow, ox, pig, and horse. That's it. That's the beginning of civilization. Why couldn't they just domesticate all kinds of other animals? Because most animals can't be domesticated, like kangaroos and rhinos. You can't ride them. You can't throw a saddle in the back. You can't have them pull your plow. You can't milk them. You can't breed them in captivity very well. What it takes to be domesticated, you can't grow too slow, so gorillas and elephants are not good for this. You have to be able to breed in captivity. Cheetahs don't like being watched in a little zoo cage. They have to have a nice temperament. Zebras are not particularly good about this. I'm told by my friends and scientist friends that work at zoos that there are more human attacks by zebras than any other animal in a zoo. I guess they're ornery creatures. They can't be too skittish and panicky like deer, and they have to be able to follow the crowd or leader like dogs, cows, and sheep, and so forth. All right, given that background, the question I have is, why did Europeans invade and conquer the Americas and Australia? Why didn't Native Americans and Australian Aborigines invade and conquer Europe and Asia? This is one of the great questions in all of history. Why did it unfold the way it did? Previous answers were things like racial differences in intelligence, warm versus cold climates, good luck versus bad luck. My friend Jared Diamond gave us a scientific answer in his book, Guns, Germs, and Steel. And the answer is, in brief, this is like an 800-page book, so I'm giving you the Reader's Digest condensed version here. Europeans had superior guns, germs, and steel with which to eradicate Native Americans and Australian Aborigines. But why did Europeans have better guns, germs, and steel? Well, first, guns and steel are the product of advanced technology that only comes after a great leap forward in culture and the division of labor of a complex society, which can only come about from having smart farming. And the germs wiped out Native Americans and Australian Aborigines because they weren't used to hanging out with animals. And those Europeans who did had developed immunity from crowd diseases after most of them were wiped out in plagues. The remaining ones left that came over with these diseases that they had immunity to, the Native Americans and Australian Aborigines had no immunity to and decimated their populations. But why did Europeans get this head start over Native Americans and Native Australians? Because they had domesticable crops and animals, a large contiguous landmass of similar climate. So one of the great discoveries that Jared Diamond made was to note that not only are those a bit of luck where those animals and plants just happen to be, but how they can disperse. So you have the gigantic Eurasian and east-west axis, which the climate is pretty much the same across there, so it's easy for animals and crops to move by diffusion, versus Africa and the Americans, which are north-south, so the climate is radically different, and animals are less likely to move and survive, or you can be isolated like in Australia and New Guinea. So our answer to the question then is, with farming and animals, Europeans got a head start in making the transition from bands and tribes to chieftains and state societies can afford guns and steel and are immune from nasty germs. So this is a nice way to sort of look at the bigger picture, the importance of smart farming, and why history unfolded as it did. We can actually create a scientific explanation for that. Okay, and then I'm going to finish up with some other food myths. This is from our latest issue of Skeptic. We'll look at vegan, paleo, Mediterranean, low-fat, low-carb, raw food, gluten-free. This is a really hard topic. The reason it's a hard topic is it's hard to do a gold standard, double-blinded, randomized, controlled study on diet. There's tons of them, but if you actually read them, most of them are really bad. They're poorly done. It's not the fault of the researchers, it's the fault of the logistics of doing it. We can compare two groups who eat different diets. For example, vegans versus meat eaters, or Mediterraneans versus Americans, but they differ in other ways that affect results we didn't think to control for. Maybe Mediterraneans smoke more. Maybe Americans don't exercise as much. Maybe vegans have a particular lifestyle that meat eaters don't, and that's causing the effects on health instead of the food. You can't know without controlling the variables, and it's really hard to control the variables. We can ask people what they eat, but these are self-report data. See, what did I have for breakfast this morning? Did I eat both of those sausages or just one? Yeah, I think I just ate the one. Yeah, and I skipped the eggs. Wait, no, there were no eggs. Or were there eggs? I can't remember. This is the kind of data that are reported in these studies. People tend to misremember. They misestimate portion sizes. They forgot that they went to McDonald's at 3 in the afternoon in the middle of, I had that double cheeseburger. Oh, yeah, I forgot. You can tell people what to eat for a study or even provide them the food, but again, you're relying on them complying to your study. Maybe they don't want to. Maybe they forget. Maybe they got hungry. There's been studies on prisoners. They're not going anywhere. They're not sneaking off to McDonald's. They're only going to eat the food you stick in front of them, and they're going to eat it. But the problem is the populations change. Some prisoners are let out. Some new prisoners are brought in. They're all reported in the same N, the number of subjects in the study. It's not the same. Some of them smoke. Some of them don't smoke. Some exercise in their 1 hour a day. Others don't. It's hard to control for those things. So what we know for sure is this, that we need 6 categories of nutrients: proteins, fats, carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals, and water. 14 essential vitamins, 17 essential minerals, and 9 amino acids and protein that are essential in a diet. But the problem is people get this from a wide variety of sources. Eskimos get most of their nutrients from raw meat and blubber. The Maasai eat raw meat, raw milk, and raw blood from their cattle. Vegans eat no animal products at all, and omnivores get their nutrients from a wide variety of foods. And there's no significant difference between these populations in terms of their health. Or if there is, it's tractable by other things. They have other causes of health problems that are not food related. We know, for example, that most cancers can't be cured by diet or prevented by diet. 5 to 10% of cancers are genetic, 25 to 30% are caused by tobacco, 15 to 20% cancers are caused by infection. Yes, you can get an infection that causes cancer. And 10 to 15% are caused by environmental factors like sun, radiation, carcinogens. So diet doesn't really help us with that. There's cures for don't eat sugar because sugar feeds the cancer. No, it doesn't. And we still don't know for sure on this one. I keep reading more and more about this. The link between cholesterol and heart disease, it's not as solid as you might think it is. The studies that were done were sort of rammed through. There's like 4 stages to get from what's there on your plate to inside your heart and whether you have a heart attack or not. It's not clear that link is super solid. Remember when eggs were bad? Remember? You shouldn't eat eggs. Egg whites only. Egg white omelet. Most places in the world, they look at you like, what? Why? Hey, the yolk of the egg is great. Now it is. Now it's okay. Fats. So don't eat any fat. No, wait. Some fats are good. Trans and saturated fats in very fatty, low-quality meat, not so good. But monopolyunsaturated fats are good. Avocado, salmon, olive oil, soybean oil, corn oil, sunflower oil, canola. Those are good fats, at least now. So this is part of the problem of science. It's constantly changing. The studies are not as foolproof as we like to think. And what we know for sure is that there's no monolithic paleo diet. So one diet is we should eat whatever our bodies were designed to be eating. What is it that people out in nature eat? They're on the seafood diet. They see it, they eat it. That's it. Some of our ancestors ate fish and shellfish, depending if you go. The Native Americans in California had great diets of fish and shellfish. Others ate game animals. Still others ate mostly plants and fruits. So anthropological studies today of hunter-gatherers that live, in relatively simple societies, bands, they show a huge range from 30% to 78% carbohydrate, from 7% to 40% fat, from 15% to 50% protein. Again, these Inuits, they almost 100% animal products and fat, and they don't have high cholesterol. They don't have heart attacks. Okay, so it can't be that simple. It's not that simple. It's really complex. There's also the natural fallacy. We should only eat what's natural. Well, what's that? You mean the little tiny teosinte corn that looks nothing like the modern corn? We've been genetically modifying foods for 10,000 years, and ourselves as well, like lactose. Some people are lactose intolerant. Before 10,000 years ago, everybody was lactose intolerant, as an adult, I mean. But now more and more populations, the green, have developed the lactase enzyme that allows you to digest milk. It's a great source of food. It is, unless you don't have the enzyme. But more and more humans are getting the enzyme. So we're continuing to evolve even over the last 10,000 years. And what is natural? I mean, you see organic is huge now. Studies, in fact, show that the consumption of organic foods may reduce exposure to pesticide residues and antibiotic-resistant bacteria, but they don't show that this reduction had any significant implications for human health. The amounts are tiny. Organic farming also uses pesticides, and simply washing your produce erases the effects in any case. What about it tastes better? Organic tastes better. People swear, I can taste the difference. Not if I blindfold you, you can't. Hell, blindfold you can't tell the difference between an apple and an onion. Okay, so, not to mention wine. Don't get me started on top-tier wines and vodkas. I swear I can tell the difference until I've been blindfolded and I can't, damn it. It's like, but I'm not buying the cheap vodka. I'm not buying $2 Chuck red wine either. But anyway. So the demonization of GMOs, I don't know how you feel about GMOs. It's very politicized, which I'll talk about in a second. But I think the demonization of GMOs is based on the natural fallacy. It doesn't seem natural. A lot on scientific illiteracy. People just don't really know what it is. But especially the distrust of large corporations with financial incentives, and on the myth of the evil Frankenstein playing God. This is a long tradition going back centuries to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. It was really the first book in the genre. That science taken too far turns bad, turns evil. It's pretty much every science fiction film that has a dystopian twist, which is all of them. It's the evil scientist playing God and doing bad things and so on. So I think GMOs fall into that. Of course, I've already said that we've been genetically modifying food for 10,000 years. The food our ancestors ate is nothing like what we eat. But of course, the critics will say, yeah, but real GMOs are foods produced from organisms that had specific changes in their DNA. I mean, you got a scientist in there genetically engineering the change in the genome. But most of these are cash crops, like what you're talking about here: soybean and corn, canola, cottonseed oil, designed for resistance to pathogens and herbicides, and for better nutrient profiles. It's what's allowed us to feed 7 billion people. Well, okay, so about 800 million are still undernourished. But still, 6.2 billion people are being fed, when Paul Ehrlich said when I was in college, we were all doomed. And billions of people would die of starvation by the 80s. Never happened. What happened was the science got better of farming. Like golden rice was modified to provide vitamin A to third world children with nutritional deficiencies. And it's prevented untold cases of blindness and death. So the scientific consensus is that GMOs pose no greater risk than conventional food. There's no documented reports of ill effects on people or the environment. But the opponents of it invoke what's called the precautionary principle. Just in case it turns out it's bad, we should either stop it, regulate it, modify it, control it, and so on. I've never liked the precautionary principle. If you really employed the precautionary principle, you'd never get out of bed in the morning. I mean, there's just risks inherent in life. You got to take risks. That's just the way it is. If something bad happens down the line, then we can deal with it, but just plow forward and make better science now. Effects on the environment, not been documented. Control of foods. Well, here's where it gets what I think is really going on. There's a certain amount of anti-capitalist mentality, and something that bothers people about making a profit on improved foods. So let's look at that. I mean, I can't get 5 minutes into a conversation with an anti-GMO person before the word Monsanto comes up. You know what I'm talking about. I don't know how you feel about Monsanto, but I'm talking about the politicization here of the whole GMO thing. So my next book is called The Moral Arc, in which I talk about how moral values that we hold determine how we feel about a lot of things. And this is one of my chapters on animal rights and GMOs and these sorts of things that have become very politicized, very moralized for people. It's not just a scientific question. You see these, stopping, killing millions since 1901. Even if you only clean toilets in Monsanto, God will judge you. Ken here, I guess, used to work at, anyway. So let's look at the main objections, the political objections, the left versus right, liberal versus conservatives, and how they feel about corporations, the profit motive, and so on, and why food. So I'll look at that in the course of. So first of all, conservatives and liberals vary in terms of their worldview, what they hold to be morally important. And you know what conservatives are. Conservatives are a bunch of Hummer-driving, meat-eating, gun-toting, small government-promoting, tax-decreasing, hard-drinking, Bible-thumping, black-and-white thinking, fist-pounding, shoe-stomping, morally dogmatic blowhards. That's what liberals think conservatives are. And what liberals think conservatives are. And what conservatives think that liberals are a bunch of hybrid-driving, tofu-eating, tree-hugging, whale-saving, sandal-wearing, big government-promoting, tax-increasing, bottled water-drinking, flip-flopping, wishy-washy, namby-pamby bedwetters. So here's how liberals think that conservatives see the world. And here's how conservatives think that liberals see the world. So the politics are very divided, which colors our views of things. But why food? Why is food getting hammered like that? Why GMOs? Well, I want to look at the anthropologist Alan Fiske's relational models. So he has four relational models. The first one is what he calls communal sharing. These are relations between people and things in our world. So communal sharing is things like that we share with relatives, couples, families, and friends in most circumstances. Authority ranking is like the relationships between teachers and students, between the employer and employee, boss, parents and children, and so on. Equality matching are like friends splitting gas, informal exchanges, marriages. And then market pricing, the economy of strangers. This is how billions of people can live in these gigantic societies because we have market pricing. So communal sharing is like freely sharing resources within the group. No tab keeping. You don't have to keep tabs. We trust one another. It's kind of an egalitarian, equal attitude, and we're not going to contaminate each other's moral values and so on. Authority ranking is sort of linear hierarchy: dominance, status, age, size, strength, wealth, precedence, tribute from inferiors, obedience, paternalistic. This evolved when societies got large and became hierarchical. Equality matching is tit-for-tat reciprocity, division of resources equitably via turn-taking, coin flipping, matching contributions. The thing with kids, you cut the cake and I'll take which half I want, which forces you to cut it as equally as you can. We do these things to kind of quality matching. And then market pricing, which is what currency and prices, rents, salaries, benefits, interest, credit, and so on. So I think what's happened here, just more examples of this, like if a restaurant diner, instead of paying for his tab at the restaurant, invites the owner to dinner at his house, and I tell you what, you come over to my house and I'll fix you dinner. No, you pay for your your meal that would be weird. That would be a weird violation. Or if you had a dinner guest over for dinner and they took out his wallet and offered to pay you for the dinner you just made him, it'd be like, well, that's weird. This would be an example of shifting in different relationships. It's like it's in the wrong category. Like Woody Allen has this funny joke about, on his deathbed, my grandfather sold me this watch. That's a violation of these relational models. Prostitution, the reason it's so controversial is because sex is normally within that equality matching. It's part of a communal, it's a marriage couple thing. You don't sell it. But when it's sold, then people get, their moral modules get all wired. Whoa, selling sex. Or organs, selling kidneys. Might as well, you got 2 of them. There's already something of a market, and the libertarians have worked it out. There'd be more organs available, more people would be saved. It'd be a good thing, but culturally we just feel like you're taking this thing that belongs over here in the sort of equality matching, communal sharing kind of thing, and you're putting it in the marketplace, which doesn't seem right. Or why there's this constant tension or between Arabs and Israelis over the sacred land. For you and I, it seems obvious, 2-state solution, obvious. That's just what they should do. Quit fighting. But for them, it's like two people with the same deed to the same piece of land that they hold sacred. It just doesn't feel right to them. And so I think foods and GMOs in particular feels like communal sharing, equality matching. It belongs in that category, but it's shifted over in the late 20th century into the market pricing, particularly once you patent food, the genomes of foods, and it feels like you've violated a deep moral value. And I think that's what tweaks people out about it. In his book, Diet Cults, Matt Fitzgerald argues that a propensity to make moral judgments based on others' food choices began as a practical way to encode trial and error knowledge about safe foods, and later became hardwired into human behavior because of the survival advantage of group cohesion. In other words, some foods are good, some are bad. Somebody figured this out. But you can encode it in a religious tradition, like food taboos, like kosher and so forth. And so for somebody that violates kosher that's in that religion, say, that feels bad, feels like a violation. And in my opinion, today's environmentalists, environmental activists, and animal rights activists and so on, this is like a religion. I mean, it feels like when you're talking to somebody who's deeply religious, that's what it feels like when I talk to environmental activists and animal rights activists. It feels like this is a religion for them, like it's a sacred value. It's not just some political debate about the rate of progressive tax versus regressive tax or whatever. It doesn't feel like that. So moving on, gluten is the latest food sin, and that's probably the right way to say it. As you know, gluten is a protein composite found in wheat and related grains. The only people that it really matters for is the far left there, celiac disease. Celiac disease is an autoimmune disease, and the protein eats away at the cellular lining of the small intestine. So celiac patients have to be very careful about eating gluten-free diets, but that's pretty much it. Some people may have a slight intolerance, maybe, but as you go down the scale, it shifts into pretty much fad, pseudoscience, nonsense. Wheat allergies. Back in the 1980s, I was a bike racer. I did the transcontinental race across America, and so I was a really serious cyclist. So I started studying diets because I figured that would probably matter. So I went to this food fad place. They didn't call themselves a food fad place, but it turns out that's what it was. And their thing was wheat allergies. And it turns out I had a wheat allergy, and I had to go gluten-free before they even called it that. You have a wheat allergy, because they took a little bit of my blood, they put it on a slide, and they put some wheat powder on there, and the blood cells kind of clumped. They said, you see, this is what's happening, Shermer. The blood cells are clumping in your capillaries, and your circulation's not as good. You'll be a better athlete if you don't eat wheat. So I tried to do that, which is not easy. Even in California, back in the 80s, this wasn't a thing. So anyway, then a friend of mine and I got the idea that we would take two of our samples of blood and just send one of them in, and then send the other one in and see what happens. And so I sent one sample of blood under two names and got two completely different readings. Different food, allergies, and so on. So I realized, okay, this is nonsense. Things like ADHD is caused by gluten, or autism is caused by gluten, or autism can be improved by eating a gluten-free diet. There's no evidence for any of this at all. Physical enhancement, like athletics or whatever, and then diets and so on. So let's look at that. Let's look at some of these diets, and then I'll finish up and take a few questions. So the raw food diet, oh boy. This prohibits any food being cooked or processed in any way, ignoring the fact that cooking can actually improve access to nutrients. One theory about what caused our brain to get so big was cooking. This is a huge consumer of calories. It takes up, it's only 3 pounds of your whole body, but it consumes about 30% of all your calories. And so meat actually can fuel that huge brain much better than raw foods. Another one of my favorites is the werewolf diet. This requires fasting during the full moon or new moon and eating differently for each phase. I like the little cartoon where she said, the werewolf diet, it's great. You can eat anything you want, but only during the full moon. Oh boy. The cookie diet, 500, when I first heard this, I thought, this is great. I love cookies. I could just eat cookies all day. Actually, any of these diets, if that's all you eat all day, that doesn't last very long. 500 to 600 calories a day of special high-protein, high-fiber cookies, plus a normal dinner, Dr. Siegel's cookie diet. The 5-bite diet. You can eat whatever you want, but you must skip breakfast and eat 5 bites of food for lunch and dinner. Well, I got news for you. I can eat a huge burger in 5 bites. You can do it if you really have to do it. This is another one, the ones I tried when I was a bike racer, the Master Cleanse lemonade diet, which is lemon juice, cayenne pepper, and maple syrup mixed with water. I'm not sure why this particular ad added the smooth move tea, because you don't need the smooth move tea. Everything moves very smoothly, I can assure you. It's pretty disgusting, and then if you do it for a week, not only you're weak and wiped out, when you try to eat food, your digestive system is not ready for that. Here's another one of these winners, the baby food diet. This allows up to 14 jars of baby food a day, each containing 20 to 100 calories, followed by a low-calorie dinner. Yeah, okay, well, just try it. The cabbage soup diet, 3 times a day. You eat cabbage soup with a few other low-calorie foods. I found an ad for 7 reasons why the cabbage soup diet is a bad idea. I can think of one. I was just in Germany with my wife. She's from Cologne. And, of course, you got to have a big old bratwurst and sauerkraut. And, sauerkraut, I mean, you just eat a pile of sauerkraut. And, oh, boy. Let's go walk around for a while, honey. Contributing to global warming wherever you go. The grapefruit diet is based on the myth that grapefruit produces fat-busting enzymes. We know that enzymes in food are destroyed in the stomach and don't survive to act as enzymes in our bodies. People get so tired of eating one food item that they eat less or they eat more. This is another problem with these diets, is that you get so sick of it, you just end up going off the diet, eating something else, you end up eating more. This is the worst one I ran across that we covered in Skeptic. The tapeworm diet. Dieters deliberately consume tapeworm eggs, so the adult worms will take up residence in their intestines and eat some of the partially digested food, thereby limiting the amount available for humans to absorb. If you're on this diet, you've given up. I mean, you're way gone. Studies show that being on a diet doesn't actually help you eat less. It could be that the way diets work, to the extent that they work at all, is being on. It's not the diet, it's the being on part. Because the being on a diet makes you vigilant and thinking about, what it is that am I eating? How much am I eating? Weighing myself. Well, if I'm going to do this, I might as well exercise and give up smoking and do these other things. Before you know it, you feel better, but it probably has nothing to do with the grapefruit or the tapeworm or the sauerkraut or whatever. It's just you're doing something about your weight. That's probably it. So in conclusion, this is from Matt Fitzgerald's book on diet cults. What should we eat? Science has not identified the healthiest way to eat. In fact, it has come as close as possible to confirming that there is no such thing as the healthiest diet. To the contrary, science has established quite definitively that humans are able to thrive equally well on a variety of diets. Adaptability is the hallmark of man as eater. For us, many diets are good, while none is perfect. Fitzgerald says we should eat, in roughly descending order, vegetables, fruit, nuts, seeds, and healthy oils, high-quality meat and seafood, whole grains and dairy, and then refined grains are not as good, low-quality meat and seafood, sweets, and particularly fried foods at the bottom of the heap, but it's not going to kill you. It sort of reminds me of the joke about the doctor who tells the elderly patient, "You will live longer if you stop drinking alcohol, eat only super healthy foods, stop eating meat, forgo all sweets, put yourself on a severely restricted caloric diet, and stop having so much sex." To which the elderly patient says to the doctor, "You call that living?" Thank you very much. So we have a few minutes for questions for your break. I'm not a dietitian, so I can't tell you what to eat exactly. Just kind of reviewing what we know from the science. You don't have to use a microphone, but go ahead.
Well, maybe for the benefit of everyone, but thank you for the presentation. Was one of the reasons I came to the conference because I saw the topic and was intrigued to see what direction you were going to come from. It's more of a comment. I come from three directions. I'm a farmer, I'm a professional neurologist, and I actively do agriculture consulting using a new technology. And some of the things you talk about is the way I talk to customers about something that's new, relating to what they're already experiencing, trying to get them to recognize having a problem. But one of the other challenges, and especially in years of economic challenge for a farm, when I go to a trade show, I see suddenly an array of non-conventional nutrient sources that are preying on farmers. If you could comment a little bit for the group, what thinking processes should they go through as they're trying to assess something that's new to use on their farm?
Yep, that's a great question, a good point that I've heard other people at breakfast this morning talking about, and there's a lot of that stuff in all industries. Like alternative medicines, it's just rampant with anecdotes. So the quick line is anecdotes are not data. They're just stories. And everybody's got a story about, I tried this and it worked, and I tried that and it worked. Okay, what about the things that don't work? And all the times you tried it and it didn't work. So in science, you need to have not only the hits, but all the misses too. So this is the confirmation bias at work. So somebody's got nutrient X that you put in your corn or whatever it is, and it's going to make it better. Okay, where's your data? Let's see. I mean, if you have anecdotes, well, this guy tried it and his corn did this or whatever, that doesn't count. And so you need some peer-reviewed studies or the equivalent thereof, people that do this for a living, like this guy that spoke for you last year from England. Apparently he runs one of the oldest of these experimental agrarian testing places where they test these things. They run controlled experiments. You have to have all the misses and to see if the effect you got was random, because things happen all the time, just randomly they happen. Or is it due to the thing that you think it is? It's the problem I talked about with testing diets. What else is the person doing? They slept more, they stopped smoking, or they smoked, whatever, they felt different. Maybe it's not the food. And so the only way to know for sure is that. That is, what kind of studies have been actually done? What is the quality of the study? Who did the study? And is the study done by an independent source, or is it by, say, a corporation? So here I'll be slightly critical of corporations that tend to be supportive of corporations, but it's like when the tobacco industry did studies on whether smoking causes cancer. They have a conflict of interest. That's why you put your conflict of interest in your scientific papers. Here's where I got my funding from. You have to do that because there's an obvious problem there of bias. So, is it done by somebody who doesn't care what the outcome is? That's who you want to do those studies. So we call this the baloney detection kit. Something blunt. Well, okay, what's the evidence? Quality of the evidence. Who's making the claim? And who collected this data? Is it an independent source? What are their biases? What motives would they have for finding that? Has somebody else corroborated that particular study? Has this been done in one lab, or did a second lab find the exact same thing? Remember cold fusion? Energy too cheap to meter, it's going to change the world and all that stuff. Nobody could replicate it. And within months, the whole cold fusion thing died back in 1989. Bad science. You shouldn't hold your press conference before your studies are corroborated by somebody else. So that's roughly speaking. Whenever I see those things, and everybody's got anecdotes, and the booths have big posters with so-and-so says this is the greatest thing since gluten-free. I tell you, when I go into restaurants now, I ask for extra gluten, and they look at me like, what? Extra gluten? Yeah, I like my gluten. I found gluten-free beer in Germany. I thought, that's a sin. Now that's a food sin. You're going to Germany to have beer. Damn it, I want real beer with all the gluten, whatever. Anyway, that's the short answer to that excellent question. Anything else? Yep.
Do you think there's a danger as time goes on? We keep on getting inundated with different science professionals that say that their stuff is peer-reviewed, but everybody has an agenda, whether it's Michael Mann or whoever, right? David Suzuki. Do you think there's a danger of the consumer, of the public, being overloaded with all this stuff and just not believing any science anymore?
Yeah, this is a great question. If you didn't hear it, he's talking about the inundation of, say, studies. Everybody's got a study, and everybody's got an agenda. David Suzuki, Michael Mann, you're talking about climate change. Yes, of course, everybody does. So the question is are other people finding it, or is it just this one particular researcher? Is it corroborated or not by other labs and so forth? And the other problem is now there's a glut of electronic journals that turns out they're phony. They're just pumped out by these companies in China, and they send out letters to academics. I get these letters all the time. Would you like to publish in the Journal of Social Psychology and whatever? It's like, okay, and you look, and it's like they publish these articles, and they charge the authors to get published. So a lot of third world scientists that can't get into the major journals are turning to these just to get their name in print, but they're phony journals. So anybody can now claim, look, I was published in this journal. They all sound really technical. So the problem, and it's made even worse by the fact that there's a glut of real good journals, actually, that I can't even keep up with in any one field, and those are legitimate, and I still can't keep up with it. So again, past yes, I've been published in a peer-reviewed journal, okay, but has somebody else confirmed this? Or is it just your lab finding it? That's all we can hope for. But still, it's the whole thing with the link between cholesterol and heart disease. This has been around for decades now, really half a century. Really since Eisenhower had his heart attack. That's sort of when it began. Like, okay, we got to do something about this, and whenever the government says we got to do something, look out. Because now there's going to be a bias. What are they going to find? And so I'm still not convinced. My doc says you should take a little of this, statin. Really? I don't know. Not convinced yet. I did for a while, and I stopped, and can't tell any difference. Hope I don't keel over dead on the way out of here. Oh, I should have taken my statin. So it's a problem for all of us. Everybody claims to have science. What's the quality of the science, quality of the evidence? That's the big thing. I'll tell you what, I'll end with a fun example that puts together all of these effects. the priming effects, the confirmation bias, and then finally I didn't talk about expectation violation. Again, we find these patterns A and B and C and D. We expect this to happen. When something else happens, it takes us by surprise. It's the basis of humor and magic and things like that. And this is sort of a funny video clip capturing all that.
This is the venue they chose for their fake auditions for an advert for lip balm.
We're hoping that we can use part of this in a national commercial, right? And this is a test on some lip balms that we have over here. These are our models who are going to help us, Roger and Matt. And we have our own lip balm, and we have a leading brand. Would you have any problem kissing our models today? I think that was fine. That would be fine. So this is a blind test. I'm going to ask you to go ahead and put a blindfold on. Okay, now can you see anything? Hold up so you can't even see down. It's completely blind now, right?